Mechanical parts. Luckily, the creator of this mod prepared this amazing demo for us. Like seriously, this is incredible. So as the name suggests, we get a lot of mechanical parts. And now if I flip the switch, you can actually see this gear working against the suspension. And like, this is so smooth. This is really what is blowing my mind about this. Like, just look how smooth these gears are rotating. Like in most other mods that add gears, you do not have this smooth collision. And we've even got hinges. Like, we can rotate in both directions. This is so mind-blowing. Like, this mod is actually adding the mechanic part of scrap mechanic. And here we've got bearings you can actually build stuff onto. Parts that allow you to build actual realistic car steering. Like, I think this is some kind of suspension, or I don't know, I'm not a cars expert. But like, we can steer, we can move the wheels up. This looks so epic. And of course, we can also spin the wheel. Well, you can see it's a little bouncy, but this is so impressive. I have no idea how it works. The biggest problem of the mod is that you don't get those amazing parts itself, but just tiny pieces of the gear. So you need to download one of the many blueprints, and then you can spawn individual gears in like this. And yes, these are basically glitch welded parts, so this works as well. Building parts. You can already see the amazing buildings you can build with this on the workshop page. Like, they look really incredible. So first off, we get a bunch of new and amazing looking doors. We can have a little domino effect. Kind of funny. Every door also acts as a switch, so you can use it to directly open the door. Then we've got modern and classic door trims, and these act as controllers, so you can easily use them to open your doors directly. We also get an invisible bearing we can use to open doors, which is gonna look a lot nicer than the bearing always being visible. Then we have pulsing lights, which look a lot more epic at night. We also get torches and lanterns, and of course also candles. But we cannot control them with logic though, but you can just interact with, well, you can interact with the lanterns and stuff. There's chains which will swing when you hit them with the hammer, which looks a little weird if you try and stack them. There's also a lot of new building blocks. This sneaky brick acts as a controller. Then we have an entire brick wall as a single block. Also curve, which makes building stuff really easy. Then there's a lot of bevels and curves, and long wedges in all sorts of materials, from brick to stone to wood. There's even some tiny wood pieces to play around with. Metal pieces, tile blocks, spaceship blocks, a barrier wedge, some roof blocks, and some glass pieces that look a little weird. Then we have railing blocks, which look really cool. You can even build them diagonally. And then there's also all of these in wood. A nice assortment of wooden windows. We've even got some angled ones over here. And then all the way over here we have some metal windows and some normal looking glass windows. And if you close scrap mechanic, you can also see windows. Then we have a wooden wall, some fences and fence corners, metal staircase blocks, glass railing blocks with some support pieces for the gaps in the middle so the metal bars don't float. Some scrap mechanic inspired parts, and this up here is an even exit sign, because normally it takes up 3 blocks and now it just takes 2. Lastly, we have some props, like these awesome barrels. Really like this crate cover and the red beads here. Then we have some planks, and I failed at making a table, so imagine this looks better. Just like these swords do, with this nice Wonk Enterprise banner. Then we have a variety of potions, which I definitely wouldn't recommend drinking. Followed by more chain pieces, when there's some individual ones, some longer ones, these weird curved ones I can't rotate for some reason. There's also this rope stuff, which is looking a little weird sometimes. Then there's ivy with flowers and without flowers, and these brick decorations, and now this thing is weirdly reminding me of pizza. And then there's some shield decor, and yeah, I think you get that these are awesome building parts. These screenshots make it fairly obvious. Niko's polished railway infrastructure. Some of these parts are unpolished, but they're so good, I don't really think it matters. Like, first up, there's so many train tracks. I'm no train expert, but there's a lot of train track parts. Like, here's just a bunch of them I smacked together, and there's these frog things, there's switches and stuff. There's a lot of train stuff. Like, you're not gonna run into any problems building a track. But there's also these wedges, which don't really have collision, which are to reduce collision embankment. There's also rail joints you can put onto your rails. which makes them look really good. Then we have these overhead poles out of metal and concrete. There's these polished warning signs and these naming boards. If you press off them, you move forward, and if you crouch and then press on them, you'll move backwards in the alphabet. It even includes some polished characters, so I guess that could come in handy. There's different platform parts and these crossing things I don't really understand. But then again, I'm not a train expert. I hope you know what this is. Then we have real logos of train companies. There's even some logic parts. So this thing only activates after you have an input for more than 600 milliseconds. So like any short presses on the button won't activate it, I actually have to long press it. And this block converts any input to 4 ticks output. So if I press for a very short amount of time, you can see that this light glows a little longer, and if I hold the button, it goes out after just 4 ticks. And here we've got a daylight sensor, so if I change my time to night, the light actually goes on. So if you want to control street light, this is actually really useful. Then we've got relay cases, which we can actually open. And in this case, I prepared something. So this is a circuit breaker, and as you can see, the logic is going from this gate to this gate through this thing. And now we can use this one to cut the power, basically. This panel can detect train movement somehow. So if I now move my block over a black and a white sensor, you can see that this light starts lighting up, and that's really interesting. I think I can even control the delay on this thing. Then we have a variety of train sensors you can place onto the rails to detect movement of trains. Yeah, you can see it keeps lighting up when I move near it. And there's also clocks you can put onto your station. Obviously, this is a super detailed train mod, but like the results speak for themselves. Vinceling's Logic Tools and Parts mod. This mod adds some essential logic tools. If you like me have hand-wired stuff, you know what a pain it is to do all of these connections. To use the connection copy-paste, we need to paint one logic gate light pink like this. Then this needs to have some connections on it. Then we change the color to this beige light orange thing. Paint another logic gate, and now if I press E on this block, you'll see that we copied the connections to one block. So all the outputs of this block have also become the outputs of this block. Parallel connections. For this to work, we need to paint our inputs black. So I'm gonna make this whole row black. Then the outputs are gonna be white. And to show the thing which connections to make, we're gonna make one black logic gate dark gray like this, and one white gate is gonna become light gray like this. Then I can activate the tool, and you can see we've just made 6 parallel connections. But this will only work if the logic gates are next to each other. Connection marker. You need to place this 2 times on the creation. Then I'm gonna mark our input green. The output is gonna be red. Then you show the direction by connecting these 2 blocks together. Now if I were to activate this, it's gonna connect this green logic gate to all the other red logic gates. So if I just press F on this thing, we've just made 4 connections at once. I can add a new logic gate, paint it green like this, press F again, and we've got another 4 connections. It's so much faster than doing stuff by hand. You can also invert the direction like this. And boom, we've just made another 4 connections. And if you place down the chat log block like here, now all the messages are gonna show up in chat. Next we have the quick logic gate and the quick logic controller. And this stuff is just absolutely mind-blowing. It's basically vanilla logic, but faster. Normally these quick logic gates don't do anything because you first need to place down the speed logic controller. And now we can control the speed of this thing. So if I have this at 1, this is what normal logic gates would do. It takes a while for all of these logic gates to send their signal to this logic block. But now if I increase the speed to like 128, it's instantaneous. This is just mind-blowing because like, if you have a big logic creation, all of these delays really add up. So the movement is kind of slow. And like this could just run smooth and completely fine if I were to just use these quick logic blocks. Oh, and there's also an interface block which you can use to communicate with the RAM block. Like with this stuff you can probably build a computer in scrap mechanic that has like a kilohertz of processing power. Naval parts pack. First off we get this armor block which has the exact same stats as Metal 3. Here I've got an entire sheet of this new and heavy block floating on the water. And the secret is this ballast tank. If you look at the stats, you can see it's very buoyant. And you can also connect these ballast tanks to a logic input, and if you then press a button, they are gonna apply a downwards force, so you can actually build really cool submarines with this thing. Although you're likely gonna need a lot of them if you wanna build a heavy submarine. because this takes forever to just float to the surface again, and I already put these things around the entire thickened metal sheet. There's also a water detector, which I just put onto this lift. So if I now lift this whole thing out of the water, you can see that the logic system also goes away. And also torpedoes. There's 4 different torpedoes. And depth charges. These torpedoes need a logic input, and if I then flick the switch and it's underwater, it's gonna start moving rapidly, and we're gonna see explosions. And there's also disappearing cubes, so when these blocks get a logic signal, they will disappear, and the switch will also activate all of these 4 torpedoes, launching them all at once, which should give us a good comparison of these. So let's do it. Alright, you can see some are faster, some leave a trail at the top of the water, and they of course also destroy blocks. And ships for that matter. And these depth charges are gonna explode after a certain amount of time after you dump them into the water. So if I now activate the logic signal, now they exploded. Sorry, so this one explodes after a certain amount of time. And this one will explode after reaching a certain depth. So if I keep moving my lift down, at some point it's gonna explode. There you go. And lastly, there's also disappearing pipe pieces. A neat little mod that gives you all of the essentials for epic water battles. Non-interactive parts, interactive parts, and car interior parts by Lord Payne. Honestly, I couldn't pick one of these mods, so I'm just gonna review all 3 of them. So the interactive parts give us a lot of new suspensions, and even these shock absorbers, which are pretty cool. New pistons, and I really like this lift piston, it's so unique. And this air balloon piston is really big. Oh my god, it just gets so huge for some reason. We also have smaller and much more powerful engines over here. A truly absurd amount of lights. Like, there are so many of them. Especially for cars, this is gonna be great. New buttons and oh my god, they even light up. I did not expect that. That's cool. There's these door handles, this kind of button, these pipe button and switches, and there's also a pipe controller. We have a tiny bearing that's really good for pipes, I think. Bearings that look like brakes for wheels, these giant bearing thingies. We almost have a rainbow of new driver seats and some sharks as well. Now this is just from the Raft shark mount, without the mount of course. You can even ride the shark now, and actually if we steer, the shark turns as well, which is just so cool. This is just a small passenger seat. These seats now have movement if I drive around, which looks kinda weird since I'm not actually holding a wheel. And yeah, they have different movements depending on the seat, and almost like boxing with this thing. Here we've got a side mirror with some handlebars, a steering wheel which we can use to turn on this light from the driver's saddle thing, and some speakers which are basically just toadbot heads. And if we click on this weird rock, there's not a random shadow for no reason, we actually create a huge camouflage rock. Now you might think these are actual propellers, but they're actually just reskinned thrusters, and I should hold the button. But don't worry, we'll get you a mod that has actual propellers later. And lastly, we have a gas cap block, some more powerful and weaker thrusters, this elevator signal thing, and these grills which open and close. So we've got windshield wipers, pulleys and belts, but of course all of these parts are just for aesthetics, so they don't actually work, sadly. Paint ammo before it was added to creative, batteries, a shoe, light bulb socket, this air filter, some more grills, gloves, and a backpack of a mechanic, these nice mechanic ornaments. And from the Lord Payne Brewery, we get Scrap Mechanic Brew since 2016. Now you really want a baguette from David Baguette's Bakery. Then we've just got a bunch of mirrors, some propellers, a thumbs up, which you should also give the video, some grills, ball joints, and these border fences, which don't have the most fancy texture. Yeah, that was a really bad one. Here we've got some differentials, some pipe pieces, and I think some pieces have a broken texture. There's also these extremely heavy counterweight blocks. I'm just gonna let one off the lift and you'll see what I mean. They are a little weird because they're technically larger than just one block, but they are super heavy. Like, I can't yeet this thing around. Lastly, we get a few new wheels, mostly intended for roller coasters. Then we get some wheel fenders, some curved blocks, and even more wheel fenders. But speaking of car stuff, there's also the entire car interior mod. So there's a bunch of gaming racing seats with some weird steering animation. steering wheels with broken models, and this is a steering wheel with an airbag, and if we connect it to a trigger, it should explode. I got worried it might literally just explode. Then we have some car instruments, but they're just for aesthetics. And a lot of these models are apparently broken. At least some of them work, and if we flick the switch here, you can connect these controls and turn them into dark mode. We've also got a bunch of interior lights, a horn that actually are like we're blowing so hard it bends the metal. Sadly, these amazing looking radios are broken. I really like this thing with the disc and everything. Then we have some pedals, a futuristic looking controller, and sadly again broken textures. Then there's a bunch of switches and buttons and handbrakes and even more switches, like there's a lot of them. And there's this airbag thing which I forgot to connect. So now we can get a little airbag, that's cool. There's also some glove compartments, this broken vent here, this working vent, a headrest, and these things to put levers on. But yeah, all 3 of these Lord Pain mods are basically a whole mod pack. OP tools. This mod adds 5 new items, which are great for managing your world or even other players. So first we have the admin tool. To use it we need a spud gun. Instruction on what the filters do is on the workshop page. If we then aim with a spud gun, we delete the blocks we are looking at. Now we can filter the blocks, for example, to only delete static objects. So now that I made this whole thing loose, I can't delete it anymore. With painter mode enabled, we can paint the blocks instead, and this is actually really effective for painting stuff. And under secondary functions, we can enable explosion mode. If I now crouch and aim, I can create explosions. Like, there's so many of them. You can easily launch yourself over the entire map this way. It's really fun. And you can destroy entire trees like this in no time. Lastly, you have the push mode. And if you then crouch and aim at an object, it's moving. There's also world cleaner you can use to just clear lifts, for example. All OP tool items, or you can do really useful stuff like only cleaning loose bodies. So now all of these tree parts are gone, but still our static tree stumps or that stuff stays. So it's really useful if you need to clean up after battle or something. But the most useful feature is the free camera mode, which allows us to like freely move our camera around the map. With one we can rotate through some functions we have, so we can do stuff like to an explosive spawner, and then I can press my mouse button to spawn explosives. We can launch projectiles like glow sticks. We can spawn 100 glow bugs at once. That's quite an interesting view. We can also spawn harvestables like hay. I can even teleport myself or other players on the map, make myself swim, change my character speed, so if I now leave the tool, I'm super fast and I can fly. Now the funny stuff happens when you have another player in your world. Now there's a function called character hijacker. I think I deleted his player and now I have become the red builder. Lol. Look, I can also lock him completely. Now he can't do anything, he's stuck. We can make people tumble. But the best part of the mod, without a doubt, is the player kicker. Like, if you have an annoying friend in your world, you can just go in here and kick everyone. Or kick a specific player. And now what's gonna happen is his game is gonna crash. So he's gonna disconnect from the game. And if you trust other players, you can also allow them access to the tools. So normally only you can use the tools. So this mod is great if you have an annoying friend, or you are the annoying friend. Engineer's Toolbox and Miscellaneous Tools. Now the reason I included both is because they're really good building tools. So Engineer's Toolbox gives us the Creation Center of Mass Finder. If I place this onto a creation now, I can use it, and it's gonna show me the center of mass of the entire creation. So if I add a bunch of concrete tree blocks over here, you can see the center of mass changing a lot. So you already see this tool is really useful for balancing creations, especially flyers. Additionally, there's also the body center of mass finder. So everything that is connected with a bearing or piston or suspension or something like that is called a body in Scrap Mechanic. So I put this thing on here now, it shows me the center of mass of just this part. Like for the wheels, it's just gonna be in the center of the wheel. We also have the drag reducer though. This reduces the inherent drag of my creation. So if I now drive around with my car and I go off the gas pedal, it still keeps driving for quite a while. So if I put this block on a flyer, for example, I can fly a lot more easily, since I won't lose all of my momentum all the time. Well, I just learned that the scale weight and the thrust scale is outdated by now, but apparently the drag reducer is really good for piston engines or trains. So perhaps you should give this mod a try. But now there's also Miscellaneous Tools. The debug information tool is currently not available. However, we've got the gravity tool. Now we need to paint the block to actually change the gravity. Now it's -11. And you can actually, yeah, you can already see stuff flying. And if you hit the thing with your hammer, you apply the gravity effect on yourself. And if you crouch, the gravity goes back to normal. Okay, and the highest we can go is 28 meters. Oh my god, just look at the suspension of this car. Like, yeah, this looks so normal. At least we've really got a drag now. Now I changed the gravity to 0 and I'm not even falling. Oh, I just left the seat, but I'm getting velocity from exiting the seat, so... Now there's also the much more useful flying tool. If we activate this thing, we can fly. And it works, we just need to look in the direction we want to go to, hold down shift, then we move, and if I press control, I'll stop. It's not the best controls, but it works. Although it's super laggy in multiplayer. Oh, and to exit fly mode, just place down another one. There's also world cleaner. We can use to either delete loose objects or delete all objects. Oh, I now just removed 367 creations. The most useful parts, in my opinion, are these paint buckets though. With this one, we can change the color of the whole creation, which is like super efficient for painting certain things. Like for example, maybe you have something built out of a lot of parts. And I think now gravity 0 is kicking in. Yep. Like imagine you have this whole creation, which would take forever to paint by hand. Now I can just do this and the entire thing is painted. But there's also the body paint bucket. So if I spawn in my car, I can use the body paint bucket, then press F, and now my wheels are still yellow. I mean, you get my point. This is just incredibly useful for painting stuff. And last but not least, this multi-part paint bucket. So to use it, you first need to place a bearing on the body you want to paint. Then you place down this bucket, connect it to the bearing. Then if I want to repaint all the duct corners on this creation, I place one of this block down there, paint it in the new color I like. Maybe I also want to change this block to the default color. And once I'm done, I just interact with this thing and now all the duct corners are changed to purple. And all these ones are changed to white. Like, this is so fast. Like, if you were doing this by hand, you would have been going like this for like 2 minutes or so. It's really easy to use, and this is why I like these mods so much. Wings mod. So in a nutshell, this mod adds propellers and wing parts we can use to build planes and stuff. So now I just slap the propeller on this little controller, and now if I let it go, it's not nearly fast enough. But you see, it works on the gas engine. Now I went ahead and downloaded some example blueprints, which we cannot spawn in. Hey, I finally yoinked something off the workshop that works. So you can see these angled small airfoils in action. Now these will somewhat calculate the air physics, so as the wind keeps pushing this way, it's actually gonna create lift upwards because the plane is angled. And to see this in action, I'm just gonna hop into the plane, press W, and just have to try another plane. Oh, you can see this one actually works. Okay, and as we jump... Okay, planes are hard to fly. But yeah, you can see that working planes are possible this way in Scrap Mechanic. Okay, I'm just doing loopings. This is all intended. But as you can see, if we just move these airfoils around, like if I do the steering, this will actually move the plane off because of the way how, like, air physics work. Look, even if I turn off the propellers, we still have some drag left, so we don't completely crash into the ocean. So you can see that the wings come in all angles and sizes. There's even some wings here, like this, where you're supposed to put propellers on top. Then there's just these airfoil base blocks. Then you have some rounded base blocks, triangle ones to like join different sections, more rounded stuff. Over here we've got these T-pieces to connect like wall-like structures. Like, there's certainly enough to build around with, and here's even some, like, asymmetrical pieces. But even more interesting are these cardboard wings, and the glow bug is not eating them. Now, we just get these in the basic models, which should be fine for most planes, and of course you can destroy them. So if you want to have an epic air battle with your friends, you can have that with these cardboard wings. Then we also, of course, get propellers, which provide thrust as we spin them. And interestingly, it also looks like you can kinda abuse them as gears. And last but not least, you get the Dragoon chute. If I activate this with a switch, yep, we get a parachute. So if I drop this thing from the lift, you can see, yeah, it's not that effective, but it's better than crashing into the ground. But if you thought the Wings mod is complicated, I would really recommend you trying it out, because it's really not that difficult. At least if you just copy blueprints of the workshop. MJM Mod. This mod adds a bunch of new cool items. And this bearing do be looking kinda thick. But these are just like regular bearings, just with different textures. These regular looking blocks are actually frame blocks. And the funny thing is, if you paint them, they turn into these solid blocks. Over here we have a fighter radar, and if I turn this on, I can track myself, and you can kind of see that it's tracking me now, where the red dot is. Over here we've got a number display we can simply control by clicking one of these buttons. We can also go into negative numbers. There's also a glitch welder. You need to place it on a creation, then you need to select light cyan. If I then paint a part and activate this thing, this part will be hidden. So if I activate the glitch welder now, you see the duck is encased in this glass. If you paint parts light green like this, then use the glitch welder and make them reappear, they will be static. So now we have just a floating thing over here. And if I paint the glitch welder, for example, red, then use the thing, the parts that will spawn back will also be red. Like, this is just such a useful tool for glitch welding. Then there's also advanced buttons and switches, which have UI that doesn't scale with 4K. Like, there's a whole keyboard, that's just incredible. So now it just says yo mama. You can change it to a switch, so now this thing will behave like a switch. We can make it only emit a single tick signal, which, yeah, these switches are just amazing, and they come in a few varieties. There's also like a microcontroller. It's just a regular controller, but it's a wedge. Then having more panel-like switches, and even controllers and logic gates and timers. So this is pretty neat. You can also paint the color of this thing. Speaking of color, there's also this LED button and this small sensor. And here's the whole thing just in a complicated looking block. I'm like, oh, I'm almost done with the video. But then I have the part that looks like this. So this inertia drive acts as an all-in-one spaceship flight core. My brain trying to understand this thing. Okay, I think I understood how this thing works. Like, it's really complicated. First, you either need this orientation module or a seat, but you need to connect the seat first to this WASD thing, and then these parts are going to provide a direction, which we then need to connect to a button, one of these advanced buttons, and inside here we can select a function, such as power, and when I then press a button, you can see that the power is working. And I can also use this to control anti-gravity, for example. Yeah, it should work, but I can't be bothered figuring this out. There's also a micro inertia drive, a micro electric engine, and a really small gas engine. Then we just have a simple laser pointer for targeting stuff, a few lights, some new pistons, like these rounded ones, and this one, so it looks like the block is sliding along a rod. There's of course also a variety of new seats, which have a quite cool look to them, and man, that's really laid back. Like, this could be epic for a mech. Well, to be honest, this doesn't look really comfortable. This one is like epic for a jetpack. Oh, with this one we can actually ride stuff. That's nice. I don't think I've seen this in any other mod. And here we've got a tiny little seat. Like, this does not look really comfortable. And also if I exit this seat, we just got teleported because there's this seat re-exiter teleporter, which changes the exit point of a seat, but of course only works for modded seats. Then we have this auto lift, which we can trigger with the press of a button. So now, for example, if I drive around with my car, and because I don't have a driver's license, I flip my car, I can now just press this button and bam! Whoa, if I press it again, the lift disappears. I didn't know that. This is so convenient, honestly. Yeah, this mod has some pretty unique features. Good thing I have this laser pointer, which also acts as a waypoint, I think. There's also this amazing looking landing gear suspension, and it has a really nice animation to it. There's a bunch of new thrusters. So these turbines just act as a thruster, but just look much more awesome while doing so. There's also a sci-fi thruster, these things, and these have different levels, so I assume these are more powerful. There's also these gimbal thrusters, and they use the exact same code from the mod pack, so I assume you know how they work, because I totally do. And all of these thrusters should also be compatible with number logic, so you can set the thrust that way. Next we've got weapons. We've got this plasma cannon, which has a really cool animation, and you can see that the projectile has no drop, so you fire in a straight line, and it just creates a regular explosion at the end. There's also a laser cannon, which is a lot faster and looks a lot cooler. Next we've got a photon missile launcher, which fires rockets, and you can't just spam the button, you need to reload them first, and you do this by painting the button white, which then will reload this thing. Of course, you can also connect two separate buttons for this. Also, you can connect these cannons to each other to fire multiple at once. Okay, this did not happen. Connect one missile to other missiles to launch in order. Well, it kinda seems to work. I'm confused. There's also the Sidewinder missile, which is quite nice and can also be reloaded, and you can also hold the fire button, which I can't really show because I would need to automatically reload the thing somehow. We can also connect a cannon to the seat, and if I'm then in first person, I'm gonna shoot where I'm looking at, which is pretty cool. So you see, we're now shooting into the sky, sort of hitting those trees there, but if I look here, you can see we hit the ground. Like, we don't have full control over projectiles, but we can still do a lot of aiming this way. Like, I can try to aim for these rocks, and oh yeah, we are mining. Yeah, this could be really awesome for battles. Well, speaking of battles, we also get freaking tank tracks. And these things are absolutely amazing. First, we need the tank engine. This one needs to be connected to a seat, and then to our tank tracks on both sides. Then we can use black input and white input to speed the thing down or up. So if I now go inside, you can hear the engine revving up. If I press double, nothing happens because I first need to turn up the speed. I think this was the white button, so if I now press this button, we start moving, and oh my god, just look at the animation. It's like actual tank tracks in scrap mechanic. It's just incredible. We can also do tank steering with A and D, just like you would with a regular tank. It's really cool. And as I told you, if I keep spamming the white key, I'll increase my speed until this... Oh, okay, the steering is really tough right now. We've got a speed tank now. And if I press the other button, you will see that I'm gonna slow down eventually. Yep. Now I can't move at all. So this is really epic. So we've got a little display like here, these pipe stair thingies, these padded pipes, and these boxes, which are for the slim lights. You can actually build a really cool looking light like this. Like, otherwise it's just empty. Then there's a bunch of stuff to slap on your blocks, basically, you know, which can add some really cool detail, I think. This is just the connection piece with interesting collisions, so you can visually connect stuff. Here we have some wedge connectors, which can fill just the spot you need. So there's even more of these thingies here, and like there's a lot of different sizes, but they're like really detailed, especially like this one. It's so tiny. There's also a bunch of robot parts like this you can use to build a robot, I guess. There's this armored chest which is indestructible, so I can't blow it up. I'll show you that in a second. There's also these new wheels which do not have rims because the rims come as individual parts like this. You can also use this hollow wheel block to create a giant wheel. And finally, there's also a bunch of windshield parts, which are better than the 2 windshields vanilla has. And here you'll see that the chest will stay. I mean, unlike the rest of these parts, the chest survived. So yeah, let me know which mod was your favorite, and see you in the next one.